Hi, this is Gail Sokol. On today's show, we're going to be talking about getting organized on your journey to baking.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Gail Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
I started my journey in a little bit of a kooky way. I didn't go right to culinary school. I grew up loving being in the kitchen, loving specifically baking. That was my passion. And I really was drawn to science, and I really couldn't figure out why. But science is doing experiments, and what's culinary? The culinary world and baking is doing experiments, only they're edible. So they're sort of the same. And I couldn't figure out why my science passion was so strong. So I took a lot of science courses, especially chemistry, in college. I also have a culinary degree, and I even have a master's in business and how to handle people in human resources. And all of those degrees have really come full circle in helping me do my passion for baking, whether it's helping me market my books. I have 2 books out there, which I'm very proud of. One's more of a textbook. It's being used all around the world. And another one just came out and is more for the home chef. And I really wanted to be accessible to the home chef and especially the home baker, because that's my passion, and how to demystify baking for those of you that are so scared of baking. And I've really met a lot of people that are so scared to bake. Needlessly, I might add, you really don't have to be afraid. I have spoken on radio. I've been on television many times. I've even had my own shows. I teach children and I teach adults all year round. And I just absolutely love it. I've gone to many venues and food festivals, and I do lots of demonstrations professionally and all over in many, many different states across the country. Getting organized. Let's talk about getting organized on your journey to baking. So there's this French term that I'm going to throw out at you, and you probably have heard it before. It's called mise en place. M-I-S-E, another word, E-N, another word, P-L-A-C-E, mise en place. And it basically means getting everything in its place. Leave it to the French, right? Leave it to the French to say things in such a beautiful way. So basically, once you start on your journey to baking, you have to be a little more organized. Cooking is fabulous, and I love to cook. Baking is my passion, but baking is different. And I need you to go in knowing that. So that's probably why people are so scared, because, ooh, you have to measure things. So what? So you measure things. You wouldn't want to travel across a bridge where the engineers didn't measure things, right? You wouldn't want to live in a house that things were not measured properly, right? So why should you eat something where things were not measured and calculated in just the right way and put together in just the right way? So in order to bake properly, there is an order to things. And that's where mise en place comes into place. This term, this getting things ready, bringing them up front, getting them next to you and ready to go. So you're not running all over the house like a chicken without a head, grabbing eggs, grabbing flour, running out to the market to get sour cream. You have it. You know you have it because you are organized and you know what you need for the recipe. So you want to start with the basics, and that is read the recipe, maybe a few times. I always read a recipe a few times, and I've been a chef for many years, and I've probably been baking since I could walk, and I still read the recipe because I remember those days when I really didn't read the recipe and I jumped into something only to have a batter halfway made and saying to myself, oops, I don't have baking powder. Oh, well, is that going to make a difference? Let's make it anyway. Well, guess what? It makes a difference. Cooking is so much easier in a way. I'm probably going to hear bad things from people about this, but cooking can be difficult. But cooking, for the most part, if you add an extra garlic clove to a stew or a soup, what's going to happen? Your breath is going to smell. So what? But baking, if you add an extra spoonful of baking powder or baking soda or an extra egg, things will happen. Things will happen that you may not expect. Maybe good and probably not good. And you will not get the baked good to the quality that you want. Let me tell you, I've done it. And it really has to be done a certain way when you bake. So you want to start with the basics. So after you read your recipe, arrange the recipe. Take your pen out and actually block it off. Block it off almost like you're staging a play. So it asks you to put your flour and maybe your other dry ingredients, your baking powder, maybe or baking soda, salt, and maybe cocoa powder together in a bowl. So put those together in a bowl. And maybe it'll ask you to put 2 eggs and some vanilla together. Put that in another bowl. So you'll have everything ready and get that mise en place ready. The other thing is, make sure you have all the ingredients. If you don't have something, make sure you go and get it. Maybe today's not the day to make that recipe if you're not going shopping for until 2 days from now. Or if you really want to make that recipe, go out and get that ingredient. But be ready. Have everything that you need. So now you're ready. You have all your ingredients. You've read your recipe. You've even put your butter at room temperature, if that's what the recipe calls for, because it does make a difference. Some people will say, well, my butter's frozen. What difference will it make? Trust me, it'll make a difference. If your butter's supposed to be melted or room temperature, it won't mix into the batter. It won't mix into the other ingredients. So please try to get your butter at room temperature if the recipe calls for that. Many cakes and cookies will call for that. So how do you do that? Well, the easiest way is, first thing you wake up in the morning, take your butter out and just leave it at room temperature. Take the correct amount out and just let it sit at room temperature. And remember, years ago, nobody refrigerated butter, so nothing's going to happen to it. Just let it sit and chill and get room temperature. And by that, I mean maybe 70 degrees. You just don't want it to be chilled. You want it to be softened. And that's sometimes the word recipes will use, softened. If you are very, daring, you can use the microwave to melt your butter. I have never met a microwave that doesn't like to melt butter. So if you have that perfect combination of power level and how many seconds you need, you can soften your butter in the microwave. But that's with a caveat, a warning. Be careful, because usually my microwave loves to melt my butter. So be careful. So do it by seconds, not by minutes. And just do it easily. So you have all your ingredients. What happens if you don't have one ingredient, like buttermilk? Buttermilk, it's so maddening when you go to the grocery store and you buy buttermilk. It comes in a quart. Who wants to use a quart of buttermilk at a time, right? Have you ever gone to make pancakes and all you need is 1 cup of buttermilk? So what do you do with the other 3 cups? They just sort of languish in your refrigerator, and you can't just say, oh, I'm thirsty, I'm going to have a cup of buttermilk. It just doesn't work that way. Some people do drink buttermilk, but I am not one of them. So what can you do? So if you don't have buttermilk and you don't want to buy it in a quart size container, do what I do. If you have some plain yogurt or vanilla yogurt, I wouldn't use strawberry, any other flavor, but if you have some plain yogurt or even sour cream, just dilute it to the volume that you need of the buttermilk. So take half a cup of sour cream or plain yogurt, could be fat-free, could be fully fatted. It really doesn't matter because it's a fermented product. And all you need to do is dilute it with a little water or milk. Any type of milk will do. Could be anything from almond milk to regular cow's milk. Just dilute it to the volume that you need for the buttermilk, to 1 cup, let's say. And it should be slightly thickened, so it should be basically the viscosity of heavy cream. And you just made yourself buttermilk. Super, super easy. Some people put vinegar in milk, and sometimes they'll get a vinegary taste in whatever they're making. So I usually don't do that. I will usually create buttermilk myself, quote unquote, by using some other fermented product like sour cream or, like I said, yogurt. So now you have all your ingredients. You've checked. They're all around you. All right. They're all around you. They've circled you. Now you preheat your oven. You say, okay, I'm baking. I have to preheat my oven. And do me a favor, look in your oven first. So many people, and this is, I mean, you're probably laughing right now. A lot of people store things in their oven. They don't use their oven. And if you are a non-baker, when I'm done with you, you're going to become a passionate baker. But right now, you may be too scared to bake. So what do you put in your oven? I know people that put extra saucepans in there. Well, look in your oven. Preheat it. Make sure the racks are level. Make sure they're in a place where you can put a cake or a muffin or a cookies on a flat surface. Then you're going to try to prep the pan. So let's say we're making muffins. Super easy, muffins. And you need a muffin pan, right? Some of you may not have a muffin pan. Well, they're super easy. You can even buy them in the grocery store. You don't need a nonstick muffin pan. You can use any type of muffin pan. Line it with muffin liners, and that's your prep. You don't have to do anything else. Sometimes I don't like to use a muffin liner. I like my muffins to climb up the sides and get really high so they get really puffy on top. So for that, I leave my muffin liners out and I just spray each cup, muffin cup, with some nonstick cooking spray. Use a high quality nonstick cooking spray. And if you don't like nonstick cooking sprays, use a little butter or a little oil. That would be fine. A neutral oil, like canola oil. You don't want to use olive oil and have your baked good taste like olives. So next thing you want to do is break the recipe down into small, manageable steps. Group the ingredients appropriately. So all the ingredients, for instance, they may have to go in one bowl. And it may say, sift them into a bowl. Well, I don't like to sift anymore. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I don't know. I'm just lazy about sifting. So, my newfound way of sifting is to whisk. So I put all my dry ingredients into a bowl and I just whisk. So get a whisk and whisk all your ingredients together. And that may include your chemical leaveners like baking powder, baking soda, salt. And if you don't whisk them properly, meaning enough, some poor, unsuspecting person will taste your muffins and say, oh, they're a little salty. Or they taste like soap. Because baking soda, if you have too much of it, can taste like soap in the end if you have too much left over after the baking process. So make sure that you're grouping your ingredients appropriately. It may say add 2 eggs. Never crack eggs into a mixer. Never crack eggs into a bowl of other ingredients. Because, remember Murphy's Law? If you crack that egg, the shell's going to go in with it. And I don't like to say to people, oh, it's got some extra crunchy things in it. Not nuts, but just extra calcium carbonate, which is what the shell's made out of. And I don't really want to taste that in my baked goods. So make sure you crack your eggs. Usually I do it in a separate liquid measuring cup because it's got a pourable spout. But you can also do it in a cup, a coffee cup, a mug, anything you want, just so you crack it ahead and throw those shells out. Break your eggs up a little bit. Get them ready to be added. Make sure that your butter, like I said before, has been prepared and softened. Or maybe your recipe calls for it to be fully melted. Wow. All right, my microwave loves that. So you just melt it and have it ready to go. Now you can actually start. So the first thing you want to do before you whisk your ingredients together, and I probably should have mentioned this before, is measure accurately. This is where a lot of people have problems. So I wrote a cookbook, I wrote a couple of cookbooks, and they sell all over the place. So if somebody in California wants to make my muffins and somebody in New York wants to make my muffins, you want both California and New York muffins to come out consistently the same high quality, right? But that doesn't always happen if the baker doesn't measure accurately. So to measure accurately by volume, all right, by volume, you're not weighing it on a scale. By volume, you need a solid measuring cup. So you need to go out and get a set of solid measuring cups. And a lot of people have these already. They usually come in a predetermined set of 1 cup, half a cup, 1/3 cup, 1/4 cup. And if you're lucky like me, sometimes they include 1/8 of a cup. And if you don't have 1/8 of a cup, I'm going to give you a little tip. 2 tablespoons equals 1/8 of a cup. So if you don't have 1/8 of a cup, all you have to do is measure in tablespoons. And you also want to get a good set of measuring spoons so you can actually measure accurately. Don't use your set of teaspoons and tablespoons because trust me, they're not the same as what the recipe is calling for. So the first thing you want to do is go over to your flour. And let's say you're using all-purpose flour. All right, that's a great flour to use. You want to take a spoon, go over to your container of flour, and put spoonfuls of flour into the cup until it's overflowing. Pretend you're on vacation at the beach, all right? And this is a pail instead of a measuring cup. And you're just going to keep putting that sand, which is really flour, and you put that into the measuring cup until it's overflowing. And then you're going to take a straight edge. You're going to level it off with something straight, like a butter knife. I love using a butter knife, or you can use a spatula, like a metal spatula, and just slide it across the top. But what would you do at the beach? You would pack, right? You want to pack the sand in to make that sandcastle? Well, we're really not at the beach. We're just pretending. So we're just going to level it off, but you mustn't pack it. If you pack it, what's going to happen? You're going to end up with too much flour. Too much flour, as I have learned, because I am the queen of too much flour. I used to put too much flour in my breads. I used to put too much flour in my muffins, and they come out dry, all right? Very dry. So you really want to make sure you watch how much flour you're putting in. So watch the measuring of it. Actually, watch the measurement of any dry ingredient. So you put that straight edge across the cup, level it off, and there you have a perfect 1 cup of flour. And you do the same thing for your granulated sugar, although you can't pack granulated sugar. There is one ingredient that you do want to pack, and that's brown sugar. Whether it's light or dark, brown sugar is a less refined sugar than granulated sugar, and it has some molasses in it. So you do want to pack it down in order to get an accurate measure. And this is where you can really pretend you're at the beach. And it almost feels like wet sand, too. It's a great ingredient to sort of play with and even have your kids help you. I once had a student not follow the method of mixing. So I'm talking about methods of mixing. There's an order to the way ingredients are combined. They're not just thrown together. So this student of mine, he was a baking student, and he loved art. And he got this huge bowl, and he was so proud of himself. He actually layered all the dry ingredients, almost like a rainbow, flour, and there was cinnamon and cloves and ginger and brown sugar, and he layered them beautifully in this bowl. You could see every ingredient. And then he put all the other ingredients, the sour cream, next to them. And he called me over and he said, Chef Sokol, look what I did. Look what I did. Isn't this gorgeous? And I looked at him and I said, what are you thinking? What are you doing? And he said, well, I just got all my mise en place. And I said, but the butter, which was in the center of the bowl and combined with a little bit of the flour and sugar, shouldn't have gone in with the flour. And the chemical leaveners should have been just with the flour and not the sugar. So he completely just put everything together. Was it beautiful? Yes. But we are not having an art display. We are baking. So I told him to actually throw out all the ingredients, which he had to do, and start from scratch. So you really do want to make sure that you watch the order of how you're mixing. And usually a well-written recipe will have this written out for you to the point where you can follow in a step-by-step fashion, and you can put your dry ingredients in a bowl, set it aside. You can take your softened butter and granulated sugar and put them in the electric mixer. This is known as creaming. And you take your paddle attachment and you cream the butter with the sugar and get it nice and light and fluffy. What you're doing is you're building this emulsion. It's really a science experiment. It really is a lot of science to baking. So you really do need to do it in this order. And a lot of people don't realize that you create air bubbles when you cream. You actually force air into your fat. And these air bubbles, they actually work sort of as a team with the chemical leaveners, baking powder and baking soda, because they create carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide gas bubbles seek out these air cells from the fat that we have forced air into, and they enlarge them so that once it gets into the oven, those air bubbles will help your item, whatever it is. In our case, we're making muffins today, help them to rise and leaven. So this has to be done in a certain order. So you really want to follow what's known as the mixing method. And there really are only a few mixing methods total. Once you know them, you'll be able to read through a recipe and know the exact mixing method. Even if you're a beginner, you'll begin to see the order of the recipe and how the ingredients are put together. So basically, I would love for you to try your hand at getting organized, start baking something, and for more information, recipes, tips, videos, if you want to get started, please go to bakingradio.com, and I would love to share information with you, and I would love to hear from you too. Tell me about your baking experience. What went wrong? What went right? Hopefully, your family and friends will have loved what you've made. I really want you to listen to my next podcast, in which we're going to be talking about my top 5 favorite baking tools. You don't need that many. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.